The PWHL entry draft in the books, lots of trades. We also have award winners. We'll talk about that and more on today's Women's Hockey Report.
This is the Women's Hockey Report presented by Locked On NHL. Your weekly look at the world of women's hockey. From the PWHL to the international stage, it's the Women's Hockey Report on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, women's hockey fans. Welcome to another episode of the Women's Hockey Report, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Erica L. Ayala here alongside Rachel Donner, and we are going to recap the PWHL entry draft. We are going to talk about winners and losers. We have so much to talk about, including the PWHL awards. But Rachel, before we get into all of that, actually some topics that we talked about specifically about coaching, we got some news about coaching. And for those who've been following women's hockey for a while, the conversation has always been Billy on the Street style. Can you name two women to enter the Hockey Hall of Fame? We've seen it happen, I believe, once, but now we have not one, not two, but three women, including the first woman to enter the Hockey Hall of Fame as a builder.
Yeah, so exciting. It's Montreal Victoire GM Danielle Savageau, and I think it's so nice to see her in that category there, and just so many contributions on the ice and now off the ice. It's really good to see. The skaters, one is a home run, the other is a okay, but we'll get into that.
Controversial take, maybe. I mean, well, we're talking about one Canadian, one member of Team USA long-term, unfortunate end to her career in my estimation. We're talking about, we're talking about Jennifer Botterill and Brianna Decker. Now, Bri Dex, I'll start there because I saw her last Olympics. Again, terrible injury, really tough, never really bounced back, breaking her leg early in the tournament. That was really tough. But before that, I had always said Brianna Decker was probably, and I don't know that it's really much of an argument, this is a hot take. I thought she was the best player for USA Hockey when she was playing for USA Hockey, and she played with Hillary Knight. I'm just saying.
Yeah, listen, I think she's a phenomenal player, and is she deserving of a Hockey Hall of Fame spot? Probably. This early? Not so much. I think there's other players that are sort of in the queue that have been long overdue that I would give it to first. Julie Chu is always going to be number one in my heart and number one on that list until it happens. And I will bring my pitchfork and torch until it happens to the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto. I also think Megan Duggan maybe deserved it sooner than Brianna Decker. But, if you're just looking at Team USA players here, of course. But I think there were other options. Jennifer Botterill, long overdue, and I'm glad it has finally happened. She has deserved it for many years.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about, again, is symptomatic of name more than one woman, please and thank you. But I don't know. I am very good with Bri Dex here. I think I agree with you completely with Julie Chu, but again, I don't know that's not Decker's fault. And Decker's career, again, undeniable. So I mean, and I will also put this out there. Jen getting in while not one but two members of the Seattle Kraken are now on the selection committee, while her brother is now the new GM. I think is really interesting. And I'm not saying that that's the reason that she got in for all of the things that you already said. I just know that, there's two members that are either on the broadcast, or Ron Francis, now the president of the Seattle Kraken, that are part of this selection committee. And again, you don't have to only name 1, 2, 3 women. There are other options, other ways you can do this. But I think it's hopefully something that we'll see where we're not just getting one woman at a time. The women's table is getting larger. That's something I talk about with Angela James all the time. She's like, yeah, we can field field a whole line if we wanted to play some hockey. Now they have some, rotations that they can put out there, line changes. But yeah, I think controversial for me, more so controversial for me, is the selection committee process and not so much Bredex. Again, I will stand on business, die on that hill. She's one of the best. She, in my estimation, was the best player while she was playing, and was criminally underrated. I think Amanda Kessel also underrated while she was playing, but I mean, pretty stacked rosters. Jen Botterill has moved to the broadcast side of things, so love to see her in that role. We also, though, have a bench boss that was named, and we talked about Seattle, PWHL Seattle, and okay, 15 years of experience, but none in women's hockey, none at really adult pro hockey. What we see in Vancouver is different. Once again, Kara Mori in Kara I Trust. And she gets someone that has a lot of experience, particularly in elite level women's pro hockey and internationally, Rachel.
Yeah, Brian Adolski is such a great choice here. And again, we talked about this last week with the Seattle hire. If you're going to hire a man in one of these roles, it should be somebody who's intimately familiar with the game, the players, the structure, everything. Brian is that guy. He's absolutely that guy. 3 years with St. Cloud State, 10 years before that at North Dakota. He's done tremendous work with St. Cloud State in such a short time. He even coached that Chinese Olympic team in Beijing. So he knows the elite level players as well. And that's the thing. He doesn't just know the college players. He knows the pro players. And because a lot of his players have become those pro players over the years. So I am very happy with this hire for Vancouver.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like is Vancouver my new Ottawa? Maybe.
Maybe. Yes and no.
Yes and no.
We'll get into that.
We'll talk about that. But I just on paper, because as much as I was enamored by Ottawa, there were things that in practice did not always work for them. But on paper, I really like what Mari's doing here. And I'm excited to see how Brian can incorporate some of what he's learned, as you said, at a lot of different levels. But so we did get that news. And we had Danielle Sauvageau, of course, there, fresh. The news about the Hockey Hall of Fame, very fresh going into the PWHL entry draft. And before we get into the picks, there were a lot of trades, some that quite honestly shocked me. I had a little watch party with some folks over at Black Rosie Media. And for as much as we wanted New York to do something, show some signs of life, they definitely made some noise. I still reserve the right, and we'll talk about it later on the show a little bit more, to figure out if I like the moves and the changes, but they definitely were the ones keeping things lively and active when it came to trades on the draft floor.
Yeah, now it's crazy because we're entering year 3 of this league, right? And it feels like the New York Sirens are doing a rebuild this year, this offseason. And 100%. That's insane to me in terms of year 3 of this league, a team is doing a rebuild. So I think they just decided we are gonna go big and go home afterwards and feel good about it. So they made 2 big trades. The first one sending Ellis Shelton, who they had protected in the expansion draft. So that was a week ago, yeah. Here, who's one of their key players to Toronto for Toronto's first round pick and 4th round pick. And we'll get into the picks of it all, but to be able to snake Casey O'Brien in addition to their first overall pick, that was a move. That was a move. And if you're going to rebuild and basically tear it down and start over, with the exception of Sarah Fillier, who they still have to sign, they have the rights to, but they still have to sign her. But I think this might go a long way to encouraging her to want to stick around with the Sirens, building a strong young team for the future.
Yeah, for sure. And again, we'll talk about the picks individually, but not the only trade that they made, Rachel. They also traded Abby Rock to
Yeah.
Montreal for Kristen O'Neill and the 28th overall pick.
Yeah, Abby Rock to Montreal. I think that part of it makes some logical sense there. Now, Rock was an inaugural signing for the Sirens when the league first started. So again, a foundational player, but they're tearing it down. So is that in keeping with what they're doing here? Sure. Does it like break your brain at the same time? Absolutely. Absolutely. But I think for Kristen O'Neill, the more important side of this trade, I think in the long run, I think it's a good change of scenery for her.
Mhm.
And I think like getting a fresh start and maybe being one of the top leaders of this new New York Sirens team is going to go a long way to help her.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really interesting. You mentioned Ella Shelton and protecting Ella, obviously Abby as well. I think it's interesting to me because, and we don't know, but were these moves a product of conversations after the expansion draft? Were they in the works before, during the expansion draft? I'd love to kind of get into and pick the brains and
Yeah.
know what was going on there. But I think what you're saying also about Abby Rock, um, it, these are big time players, right? And the New York Sirens never found their footing. And I've been
No.
beginning to question not only the construction of this roster, which here we go, we're in a rebuild as we go into season 3, but also the ability of a coaching staff to get this roster together. I don't think that their first head coach was the right pick for the talent that was on that team. To be determined, if a coaching change is needed again, but we'll find out. And so, as much as this is exciting, you talk about Sarah Fillier, not signed yet, but was there with the team to help, welcome the new picks. And
Which is also a good sign.
right, it reminded me, not to make it all about the Seattle Kraken, but like when Matty Beniers was, his contract had not yet been extended, but he showed up at the draft to be there to welcome Berkeley Catton. Not the only trade though that we saw. Before we get into coming into the next segment about the picks, winners, losers, what we thought about the picks, but Toronto sends Kristen Campbell, a goaltender, and a 19th overall pick to Vancouver in exchange for 16 and 24 in the draft that just passed.
Yeah, I think this was a problem-solving trade here for both teams in some ways. So Toronto had a goaltender overflow situation because they already had Reagan Kirk, who played a lot this past season. Even though Kristen Campbell carried them in the playoffs, Reagan Kirk had a significant share of the games this year, and they had signed Elaine Chuley as well in free agency. So something had to give here. Campbell was the odd goaltender out in this situation. So her being the number 2 behind Emrance Mashmeyer, in theory, we'll see what that battle looks like between the two of them. But Emrance Mashmeyer will likely be the number 1 in Vancouver.
Yeah, indeed. So those are the trades. And we're going to talk to you about how those trades played out. We're going to, again, kind of analyze going through the picks, who we think made out like bandits and maybe who still has some work to do because there's still time to sign players to training camp contracts, things of that nature to fill out the roster. So all of that coming up on today's episode of the Women's Hockey Report.
Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends and family? Maybe it's game day. You suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab those last minute tickets without stress. With the money you save on the tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group of friends to come with you. Game Time makes it possible. They make buying tickets fast and simple, and prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. They've got incredible last minute deals, seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. And I especially Love those zone deals for big savings, like 10% off their exclusive zone deals for FIFA Club World Cup matches, as well as those huge panoramic seat views so you know exactly where you'll be. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code Locked On NHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem with the code Locked On NHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Back for the second stanza of the Women's Hockey Report, post PWHL entry draft here. And we're going to walk our way through the picks by way of kind of analyzing winners, losers, thinking about each of the now 8 teams, and, you know, just breaking down our overall thoughts here. So we know that the aforementioned Sirens had the first pick. They had 9 overall, and we talked about how they acquired some of those picks. But Rachel, what are your thoughts on, you know, who they went with at number 1?
Yeah, it was one of those things where there's a little bit of whiplash with the Sirens here because they picked Kristina Kaltenkova first overall, which big shock to me. I thought she would go late first round for sure. But the New York Sirens saw something in her that they decided they really want. Obviously, I think a standout performer in the Women's Worlds Tournament this year for Czechia, but a really strong career with Colgate University. So she's an excellent, excellent forward, but it's just like, is she first overall? I thought it was going to be Casey O'Brien. And lo and behold, as we just talked about, they wound up trading and getting her at 3. So all was well in the world for the New York Sirens with those 2 moves. But I do like the mix of players they got with 6 forwards, a defender, and 2 goaltenders. We know they really needed goaltenders. And so getting 2 of them was really important. And one of them, you know, they had picked up in the Abby Rock trade. They used the pick to select Callie Shanahan from Boston University, who's a phenomenal goaltender who had an excellent season this past year at Boston University with a .924 save percentage. So that could end up being one of the more important picks of this draft for the Sirens.
Right. Was it the third or fourth round where they had like 3 consecutive picks or something crazy?
Yeah,
like
something
that?
like that. Yeah.
And I was like, they got to take a goaltender, right? Like,
yeah.
you know? Yeah. So I think draft strategy versus, again, how it plays out on the ice, always so interesting. And again, I think interesting is the word that I would use right now. Reserve the right to change it later. I found what the Sirens did interesting. It made the draft, quite honestly, interesting.
Oh yeah.
It definitely did. Okay. Let's go to Ottawa and Boston here, because both had 6 picks in this draft. Ottawa, I mean, we talked about this before, Ottawa, Minnesota in particular, because those were the 2 teams in the finals, definitely took a hit when it came to everything that led up to and then at the expansion draft. So, you know, the breakdown there, like you did for the Sirens, 4 forwards, 1 defender, 1 goaltender. Their top pick was a defender, Rachel, which I think
was interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. But when you lose Teralova, you know, I mean, again, Minnesota also lost a top defensive pair, but Teralova did a lot of work for that Ottawa team, needed to replace it. I think you absolutely needed to get a defender. Now, again, what I think that when we talk about women's hockey, you know, like pro ready is much closer to the college game, because a lot of these players have international experience. They play out all 4 years. And so I don't know where we're at quite yet with knowing how, just generally speaking, broadly speaking, how pro ready these athletes will be coming in. But again, they take someone with international experience. I think you up the chances that your top pick, a defender for Ottawa, is going to be ready to go.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And I think Rory Gilday was an excellent pick. Like, if you're going to go with a defender, she was definitely the right pick for Ottawa, I think. Just a super strong game. Oddly enough, she's like from Minnesota, but she played for Cornell, excellent career there. So I think it was a great pick. I think the more fascinating part of Ottawa's draft strategy was their international component, because I think they kind of went outside the box here with picking 2 Russian professional women's players from the same team. And now I'm guessing the late round pick was somebody they accidentally scouted when they were scouting Anna Shakina.
Mhm.
But nonetheless, they picked Shakina and Fenuza Kadyrova, who's another forward from the same team over there. Anna Shakina has such an checkered background, I would say. She was the one player that was cleared in the Russian doping scandal around the Sochi game. So she's older. So you're talking about pro ready. She's 28. Kadyrova is 27. So these are pro ready. Now, are they North America pro ready? To be determined. But that being said, like Anna Shakina, like definitely comes with some baggage here. Excellent player, 73 points in her Russian league this past year. Continues to be a strong player, but we'll see.
I mean, again, I think that especially if you look at those Russian teams at the time, you are getting a player that I think can compete in the PWHL. Now,
Yeah, I think she can for sure.
Like that's not even a question to me. Again, you play at an Olympics. Shakina has knows how to play at that level. Again, those Russian teams also were coming to the States at the time with the NWHL and competing against them, getting ready for some of those Olympics and after, especially for Pyeongchang. So, it's kind of, that was a younger player then, to your point. And I think the Russian Women's League kind of absorbed a lot of what the CWHL was doing as far as working with national teams, specifically China, leading up to the Beijing Olympics. So there are a lot of experience, people who went on to an Olympics. Not all of them necessarily are going to hit and compete and be a top player in the PWHL, but I think Shokina definitely can be one of them. Mentioned also Boston, 6 picks, 3 forwards, 2 defenders, and a goaltender. Including, Abby Newhook, that was like a sweet tender moment in the draft, was it not?
It was really fun. I think it's really cool that she got drafted. I think that she's going to have a battle to make the team, but I think that it was definitely worth the risk for Boston to make that pick. I think she'll fit in. Again, will she end up as a reserve player or a full-time player? I don't know yet, but fun nonetheless. I thought they picked a good mix of players in this. I really like the Amanda Thiele pick as well, the goaltender from Ohio State. She lost in the Frozen Four final, but still had a tremendous season and a really good tournament overall. So that's the one I'll keep an eye on, I think.
For sure. And then let's go to Montreal, Toronto. Both had 5 picks. Montreal goes 3 forwards, 2 defenders, 4 forwards, and just the 1 defender for Toronto. Again, they were a part of a trade here. Let's go with you and Montreal. What stood out to you as far as their picks?
Yeah, the Natalie Linkova pick was my favorite pick of theirs. She played for Minnesota, but she was a big standout on the Czechia team in Women's Worlds this year. Obviously, they also got Abby Rock in the trade. So I think if you sort of add that, plus Nicole Gosling, which is no slouch either.
Not at all.
A standout at Clarkson. So I think, even though they only had 5 picks, they made the most of the day. So I think they did a great job.
Yep. And then looking at Toronto, they go with Gentry as their top pick from St. Cloud. St. Cloud had some representation. I thought it was great, Rachel, that it wasn't all WCHA. We actually got to WCHA picks, I kind of think, a little bit later than I was expecting. ECAC, some pretty good representation. We talked about, of course, Clarkson. I think Gentry, solid pick here for them. Toronto, I think Toronto had in some ways, right, the luxury of knowing, especially in their group of forwards, that they have some just absolute gamers, right, that are going to anchor this team, that are synonymous with women's hockey. And so they were able to kind of figure out fit in a way that, I mean, everyone's looking at fit, right? But
Yeah.
not maybe immediate needs on the scoring side, or at least that's my take. I don't know what you think, Rachel.
Yeah, well, I think they did such a great job with their expansion protection list and with some of the contract extensions that they have, with Natalie Spooner and Kaylee Flanagan,
Mhm.
Jesse Comfer, Maggie Connors.
So
Those are the big
yeah,
contract extensions there. So they were in a pretty good position to start
yeah,
off with. They solved their goaltending problem at the draft. So I
yes.
think, plus like adding Ella Shelton to the mix. I mean, I think
That's huge.
that's huge, right? So I think that their picks, they did have the luxury of having that be sort of a secondary thing that'll just kind of add to the mix, and we'll see what floats to the top for them.
Yeah, for sure. And then, for Seattle and Vancouver, I think, excuse me, also a little bit of a different approach. I think Vancouver overall, I mean, the names pop off the page when you
Yeah.
think of whether it's expansion draft, whether it's entry draft, whether it's signing window. These are names that people know. And if what we've heard from Sarah Nurse, we talked about what Nursey said about how she believes Kara is trying to build this team. It's really about character and fit. So these are big time names, and um I think ego is an interesting word. There are definitely athletes that bring it on themselves. And then there are athletes where, because of their superstardom, whether there is ego there or not, it's just assumed that there's a big ego that follows. I get the sense with this Vancouver squad that, again, well-known, well-respected names that also are known for being and have this air of true professional, right? You know how there's just athletes in any sport that they usually have really long careers, right? And they're known as true pros because they come in, they get their work done, they set the standard in almost everything that they do. That's kind of how I feel about Vancouver and how they're building this squad. And I think that the picks that they made in the draft as well, Rachel, are players that fit that kind of prototype. Gonna work hard, gonna get the job done, and that's really intriguing because those teams can be really scary to play against. But sometimes also it means that who is going to be the person who drives the engine, right? Who's fueling it? So I'm very curious to see how Vancouver plays out.
Yeah, especially Michelle Karvinen was such a great pick. I mean, like legend, right?
Yeah,
And like again, one of the international players chosen in this draft. And I
great
think
catch.
she's just going to be such a good complement to the players that they've already gotten, to your
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, absolutely. And then with Seattle, I think, like, again, they followed the trend of what they did in the expansion draft. These are players that the programs that they come from, you're familiar with their game, and you're like, okay, show me what you were working with here. Like, not necessarily popping for me as like an immediate hit, but I think if it does, like, some magic could really happen in Seattle.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it was smart of them to pick up Hannah Murphy like earlier in the draft because they needed a second goaltender.
Yes.
So I think that was really important. But yeah, I just think they kind of went with a traditional draft board and then just went boom, 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 like best
Exactly.
available
Yep.
in the slot. And these players will just have to compete with the
That's it.
existing team and see who makes the team.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's going to be interesting. Again, teams still have the opportunity to pick up free agents, camp invites, and very curious to see how that all is going to play out. But now we get to talk about some awards. So the awards were actually announced before the award show, which I was like, oh, okay, that's a choice. I didn't expect that, but we've seen that happen a little bit with the PWHL before. So let's talk about who actually won the awards. I feel like we've been talking about awards for months, right, Rachel, when it came to who we thought would be our picks. Now the picks are officially in. The awards have been divvied out, and we will talk about that coming up on the Women's Hockey Report. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning for a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. I love using Monarch Money as someone who is a business owner and has a pretty big trip coming up to Milano Cortina. And yes, I am saving for all of the Italian goodies that I can fit into my suitcase. And I can do that on or with Monarch Money, because Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, your investments, and your spending in one place. I really enjoy the cash flow dashboard. There are things that you just have to pay for, non-negotiables when it comes to your business. And then there are other things that you have to budget for, knowing that all of my invoices are paid out, or knowing when I have to check on some contracts. I can do that all with Monarch Money. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. You can use code LOCKEDONNHL, and that will get you 50% off. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. You can use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right, Rachel. So we talked about the picks. We talked about what we thought about the picks. There was some pretty big hockey news, women's hockey news, Hockey Hall of Fame inductees. Now it's time to talk about the PWHL awards. Let's just start here. I want you, were you surprised by any of the picks?
I mean, I hate to keep harping on goaltending and Gwyneth Phillips, but I am 100% okay with Anne-Renee Desbiens winning goaltender of the year. I think when you have to think about it as the regular season,
yeah,
I think it does make sense. I think she had such an incredible regular season. And I know it's hard because it's you have the playoffs top of mind. And so Gwyneth Phillips absolutely stood out in the playoffs, but she had such a good regular season too. And for her to not even make the second All-Star team, I was I know Erin Frankel is great, but also I think that should have been Phillips.
Yeah, it just seems tough with how everything went down. And we had this conversation, right? Being consistently good and having the opportunity, right, to be consistent versus catching up with the field in fewer games played. For me, that warrants, especially in the case of Gwyneth Phillips, maybe not all the time, not every time, right? And that's tough. That's when you have an athlete who was started red hot and then gets injured. Can they come back and catch the field? Everything that they did early on, was it enough? Was it spectacular enough? And that's all eye of the beholder kind of thing. But I do think that, you have to I don't know. Anne-Renee Desbiens, and then I guess it's, if you look at the team, how much are we looking at the goalie performance separate from the team? I don't know. It's tough. But Gwyneth Phillips, I'll tell you this, might not have won goaltender of the year. That did go to Anne-Renee Desbiens. Might not have been first all-team, also Anne-Renee Desbiens, or second all-team, like you mentioned, that went to Erin Frankel. But I think she did, Rachel, win herself a contract and likely the net for Ottawa for next season.
She did. And you mentioned the team aspect of it with goaltending as well, but there's also coaching, right? So I thought it was really interesting that it felt like sort of a default choice here in some ways to give it to Corey Chevery, just because Montreal had the best record in the regular season.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's something to be said for that as well. It is a very strong overall team performance that Montreal put together in that regular season. Couldn't get it done in the playoffs, but the regular season, they did. They absolutely did.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's probably the right pick. I think pretty much every other coach we had times where we were kind of like, what the hell? Like,
Yeah.
what the helly? What's going on here? You know, like, so, and then unfortunately for
Listen,
Corey,
as an old person, I really appreciate, I actually know that reference, so we're good.
there you go. You know, MVP is MPP. You know, I mean, anytime Marie-Philippe Poulin is on the ice, there's a good chance that she's gonna rack up some awards, including also one forward of the year. Do you think that this is the right pick given what we saw from Hilary Knight this past season?
Yeah, I think there's a case to be made for Hilary Knight. I think there's also a case to be made for Renata Fast, who won
Yeah,
Defender of the Year.
yeah.
I think that when you're talking about most valuable player, this is like a constant struggle in sports and hockey specifically, overall, just in terms of looking at the scoreboard and the point totals and just picking who had the most or whatnot. And I think I think there is a case to be made that Hilary Knight was more valuable to the Boston Fleet and Renata Foss was more valuable to the Toronto Scepters than Marie-Philippe Poulin. Because again, Montreal had more of a team effort to get to where they were in the end.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I love having that conversation. It drives me wild when people immediately are like best player, best team. I don't think that should be the default for most valuable player. And when you have the best team and the best player is Marie-Philippe Poulin,
Yeah, like give her forward of the year. Happy to do it.
fair. That's fair. That's fair. Which again, she did win. But I'm with you. I'm with you there. I think that there were players that had more value added to their particular team. You mentioned Renata Fost wins Defender of the Year. We already talked about Goaltender of the Year and Coach of the Year. I feel like, Rachel, was this our first ever official episode branded under the Women's Hockey Report where we basically said who Rookie of the Year was going to be? I feel like we nailed it, right?
Yeah, I think we did. And I don't think in this case there wasn't a choice. There just wasn't. I mean, top scoring player who in a lot of ways languished on a very difficult team, and she went through it this year. And I think that to be able to achieve what she did, given everything, is just a phenomenal season for her.
Yeah, 100%. Again, Gwyneth Phillips, a rookie, and for a lot of the reasons that we've already said and that you just stated, Sarah Fillier, that was a good pick. I think that's a good pick. But yes, we didn't get an all rookie team. But I mean, if we were to pick an all rookie team, I mean, Gwyneth Phillips makes that team clearly.
Yeah.
So PWHL Hockey for All award goes to Laura Stacey from Montreal. We mentioned in passing first, all-star first and second team. So just to round it out, players that we have talked about but did not win individual awards: Hilary Knight on first team, and Sophie Jakes is the defender alongside I almost said Rachel Donner, which is hilarious. Renata Fast. Did you know that you were on all-star first team?
Listen, I was a defender when I played, so there you go.
No, see, it was like there was an energy I was picking up. I just saw the R. Alongside Renata Fast. I like this pick. We talked about Sophie Jakes. We talked about, of course, Lee Steckline, Claire Thompson. Not a shortage of defenders. Claire Thompson and Ella Shelton make second team. Your second team all-star team: Kendall Coyne-Schofield, Teresa Vanishova, and Daryl Watts. Aaron Frankel is the goaltender there. I'm okay with this. I think it's pretty solid. Do you think that there was anyone that just like absolutely got robbed?
I don't think so. Again, I would have put Phillips in there instead of Aaron Frankel in net for the second team. And I think there's an argument to be made to invert Sophie Jakes and Ella Shelton and put Shelton on the first team and Jakes on the second team, I think. But I won't really argue it either.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I could see where you're coming from. I do lean into Jakes a little bit more. And maybe that's just because, again, like when you're trying to win a defender of the year award, or get on an all-star team, and you look at the overall defense versus one defender that kind of stands out on a team that's like meh at best, ooh, that's tough. It's tough. But I think having Shelton in the mix is right. Is Claire Thompson too. Again, other than Fost, I think you can probably interchange these and not, get, mean think pieces written about about the awards. So that's it. That's the cap to the second season of the PWHL. Definitely brought us some curveballs, brought us 2 new teams. Rachel still trying to figure out what was going on with the expansion draft. But I will say this, in hindsight, Rachel, right? The way the expansion draft went down definitely opened up things for the draft and even in free agency and trades. So if that was the mastermind idea, then I guess job well done. But ultimately, it's all about the product on the ice and how things pan out for now these 8 teams. And we will try our best to figure that out. We'll do more analysis as we now are going into the true dark days off season. No PWHL action here. But this is an important season for the PWHL, especially because they will be coinciding, of course, with an Olympic year, first time ever for this particular league. But for Rachel Donner, Erica L. Ayala, thank you so much for joining us on the Women's Hockey Report. And we hope you follow us on TikTok. Make sure you're commenting on YouTube. Let us know what are some topics that you'd like to hear about in the off season. And, we bid you adieu as, Rachel and I also, of course, doing the men's hockey and in the middle of a draft there. It's just like draft on draft on draft. This is draft season for sure for the winter sports. But again, for Rachel Donner, Erica El Ayala, thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Peace out, everybody.